Alright, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be showing a very basic tutorial. So in this I'm going to be explaining how rigid bodies and colliders work on a very basic kind of level. Alright, so this is more or less how I'm going to be demonstrating what rigid bodies and colliders do. So we have a bunch of balls, and we press play, they all fall through, and they collide, right? Pretty expected. Alright? There's nothing groundbreaking here, but if you don't understand Unity, this can be a bit complicated to actually understand what's really happening. So, if we go here and look at spheres, each sphere has a sphere collider and a rigid body, alright? And each cube has just a box collider, no rigid body, because we don't want it to move, so it's not necessarily needed, okay? So here, first I'll explain what a sphere collider really is, alright? So, or just a collider in general. So a collider is on any of these objects by default: a plane, a cylinder, a capsule, a sphere, or a cube. All right. So if you create it, it'll have its own type of collider on it. And basically, what a collider is it tells the game engine, or the game that's being run, where the outskirts of the object are that is solid. Right? It can also be seen as kind of like a bound that can't be crossed. So let's say that this is a player, right? And he's walking, and he's walking, he's walking, and then eventually he gets too close to the wall, and bam, he goes towards the wall. Now what the game engine will do is it'll realize, hey, this has a collider on it, this has a collider on it. If this collider is inside this one, this isn't supposed to be happening. So now, if there's no rigid body on it, physics can't occur. So nothing will actually happen here. Or actually, no, that's wrong, I'm sorry. They will just it'll just get pushed off, right? The game engine will say, there's two colliders inside of each other, I don't like this, and then it'll just push it away at the closest, what's it called? Like the closest way of getting it out, right? So if it was on this side, it would push it that way. And if it was on the bottom, it would push it up to the top, right? Now, these are absolutely needed for when you're using physics, all right? Because if you have physics, you're going to want to know when your object is going to stop when it hits a surface or something, right? So here on each sphere, we have our rigid bodies, right? And basically what a rigid body does is it just adds the engine's physics components to that object. So it comes with its own mass, drag, which is how much it slows down in the air, angular drag, which is how much it slows down its rotation, use gravity, which, as you would expect, allows it to actually use gravity. Is kinematic is kind of a toggle for if the object is going to move or not. So if it's off, it means that it will be moving. But a kinematic object generally just sits there and doesn't move. Now, interpolate is more of a complicated thing that I'm not going to touch on. Collision detection I'm also not going to touch on. But then we have constraints. So what constraints do is they prevent your object from being acted on by physics in certain directions. So here, if I select all these spheres and I say freeze position Y, right? When I start, I guess I didn't choose that one, but you can see now, this guy didn't have freeze position Y activated. While the rest of them, all these ones up here, did actually have freeze position Y selected. So what's actually happening inside the engine is it's trying to add the force of gravity onto it because it's checked on. But because freeze position Y is toggled on, it won't allow it to actually move. The same goes for X and Z, and the rotation is the same idea. If you have an object that's going to be like rotated somehow using some kind of physics-based movement, and you freeze the rotation, it will never rotate in that direction or on that axis unless you edit the transform directly. It just won't be affected by physics. So to recap, every rigid body needs a collider, or else it's just going to fall straight through the ground. And yeah, there's not much more to it. To add these components if you're not sure how, you just go here to add component, and then you can have rigid body or collider, and all the options will come up. This also works in 2D, just slightly differently, but this tutorial will just kind of explain more, well, it'll help you in 2D as well. And in addition, the last thing I'm also going to show you is it doesn't necessarily need to have a mesh to have a collider. So what that means is all these have their own mesh, right? The sphere. But if I create an empty game object, this is invisible, right? It doesn't have anything active, like visually on it. But if I add a collider, you still can't see anything, but it can still have physics and collisions like a normal. So if I come here and I play, and I have this game object selected, you can see it's actually going to fall, right? And I can flip it up, and I can rotate it, and it'll fall. See that? So this can be used for a variety of things. It could be used for kind of invisible bounds that you don't want people to see, like the edges of the world and that kind of sort of thing. And the last thing that I'm actually going to show you is trigger. So if we change all the cubes colliders to triggers, basically what this does is it turns off the actual collisions, so the actual like making it a wall, it turns that off, and instead it makes it a trigger. And what a trigger does is it gives you capabilities to detect when things enter, exit, or stay inside of them. So right now you won't actually see anything really happening. You'll just be able to see that the balls just ignore the cubes completely because the trigger is activated. So you see they're just going to fall. Oh, I guess, yeah, I didn't activate the movement on all of them. Off. There you go. So if I do that, they'll all fall and go straight through. All right. So I hope that was helpful. If anyone was struggling with the really bare bones basics of colliders and rigid bodies, if you guys have any questions on how to like implement this in different ways, feel free to leave a comment. If not, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and yeah, peace.